Hi, this is Jeff from Airstream Nerds. In part one of my AV upgrade, I pulled out the insert that holds the Blu-ray player, removed the car stereo head unit, I took out the speakers, and sorted out the wiring. Coming up, I got all my hardware together. When I get back, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with it.
Airstream song, cruising to the campsite singing our song. Airstream song, we are the Airstream Nerds.
I've got all the pieces and parts that I'm going to use for my upgraded system. And I've got the box insert that they put inside the cabinet in my particular model. And my next part is to figure out how to get all these items and a power strip with the already installed Blu-ray player into this cabinet, so to speak. So I already know by having it out and playing with it a little bit that I'm going to put the power on the back here, and I'm going to run the cord up through here and plug it in. So this is, a low profile plug. It'll plug in. It is a tight fit to get it through that hole, but it does fit. So that's going to mount there. The Blu-ray player already mounts. So I have the rest of this real estate to install the rest of the hardware. Now this is the 4x2 matrix switch. Basically I have 4 inputs and 2 outputs. Now any of the single inputs can go to either one of the outputs. So I could have Blu-ray player going to the TV while Apple TVs going to the other TV. Mix and match, flip them back and forth. So that gives me good flexibility for what I want. Now, I got an Apple TV, mostly to use for AirPlay and anytime that maybe we're using the camper at our house or we have people, guests or something like that. You can do all the normal Apple TV things, but mainly it's for AirPlay. When we go camping, I take lots of pictures and I like to be able to throw my pictures up on the screen and take a look at what I've taken for the day. Next thing I have my Raspberry Pi. Now, I'm new to Raspberry Pi. I played around with this. This is pretty good. I have Kodi on here, which is a media player. And what this will allow me to do is plug USB devices into it and use my remote control to scroll through a nice laid out GUI that Kodi uses for movies and TV shows and so on. I did discover that through Kodi you can shut this thing down, but there is no button to turn it back on. The way to turn it back on is to unplug it and plug it back in. I'm not going to do that, but the people that made this also made a power switch. The problem is it's only that long, so that's going to be a trick to try to place this switch outside of the cabinet but mount the Raspberry Pi inside the cabinet. I've got an 1.4 version HDMI port, so if we plug a laptop, anything like that. Now I'm going to show you in a second where I'm going to put that and the 2 USB ports. The USB port, one is going to go to the Raspberry Pi and the other one is going to be a programming port for my remote control processor. Now the remote control processor is RF, and it has also an emitter block that attaches to it. Now, just playing around with this before I started the video, I thought maybe I would mount this under here, but I'm not 100% sure exactly how I'm going to place that and have enough real estate to neatly put all the rest in. So I really got to think this through and place some things and see how this is going to work. I also purchased a bracket to mount the Apple TV, but it's the kind of mount that would go on a wall this way, and the Apple TV slips into it. It's not really going to hold it from moving around, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole, because there's a gap. So we get a shot. You can see there's a gap here, so I think I'm going to drill a small hole in the bottom here so I can wrap wire ties around there and cinch it in to keep it from moving around. And I'll probably put some Velcro or something in there. I'll do something to make this more stable. I know from past experience that this rubber base and Velcro, they don't work well together. I could Velcro it from the top, which is also an idea. I kind of like the idea of being able to take it in and out and not having to Velcro to peel off. Now, take all this stuff off of here. Now, if you look at the front of this, the Blu-ray player, there's a couple of strips of Velcro that hold the front in. Once you lift the Velcro up, it slides right out. Now, the issue I ran into here is this face here. When you take out the factory USB port, it's a great big hole that they drilled. And these don't quite fill the hole so it looks nice and neat. So I'm gonna take this box apart and I'm gonna laminate a piece of black plastic on the front of this, and then I can drill holes here and here and put the USB port for the Kodi and the expansion port for the HDMI in there, and I may pop the other programming port over here. I haven't really decided yet, and may also put the programming port somewhere back there, since it's rarely if ever going to be used, and I could put it back out of the way and not have to worry about up front. I know that this would be a nice spot to put stuff. The problem is it sits down behind the lip in the cabinet, so really only about that much is exposed. Anyway, so I'm gonna go out right now to the camper, and now that I have all this stuff, I'm going to test fit and see if there's a spot inside I can put this, maybe in the speaker bay or something like that. So I'll be right back. All right, so I took my processor out to the Airstream, and I couldn't find anywhere that I really like to put it. So I think I'm going to fit it when this thing's not upside down. That slides right up in there. So I think I'm going to fit it right on top of the Blu-ray player. I think that works good. And I still have real estate here, and I have all the real estate up here. I think I'm going to put the Apple TV somewhere in that vicinity. I'm going to put my switcher basically right there. I'm probably going to mount this somewhere in here, tuck it in there. And I haven't quite 100% figured out where the Raspberry is going to go because of this. I may look into an extension cable, which would make it so much easier. So chances are I'm going to find an extension cable for this, and then I'll be able to place this where I want, and then just run the cable back to somewhere like here. If I reversed these two, I could put it here and still have easy access to the ports to run everything. And then by doing it this way, I still have a lot of room in the front for the expansion jacks. And still leaves me with a ton of real estate up here for power. So the first thing I'm gonna do, the first thing I have to do is I'm gonna have to take this box apart and re-laminate this front panel in here to cover that hole up. Looks like it's pretty easy to take this apart. They've got pocket screws, 3 pocket screws on each side. Doesn't look like any of this is glued together. I'll take the 3 pocket screws out. This whole piece should just lift right out. All right, so I bought this plastic sheet. It's more than I needed. I'm actually going to make the box for where the old stereo came out of this. But I'm actually going to cut a piece of this off and glue it on the face of this, route the notch out. And this is thick enough to attach these two, and I'll just end up doing these something like that. And I may, since I'm going to be doing it, I may just put all 3 of them in here, just because it'll probably be faster, just to do all 3 of them in this one piece instead of drilling another hole somewhere else while I have everything out. So tomorrow I'm going to get my table saw out and cut this down, glue it together, clamp it up. Shouldn't take very long to dry, and then I'll start getting the rest of this stuff together. Okay, so I have the new insert laminated, plastics on there covering up the hole. I bought some 1.5 inch screws, small little stainless screws to bolt these in. Now I've got to line up my ports on here and drill some holes. Alright, so everything's lined up. I've drilled the holes, and I'm now going to mark and drill the small holes for the nuts and screws to hold them in place. Alright, so I've got all the holes drilled and the screw holes drilled, but since they come through to where the screws, the pocket screws are, I have to put this back together before I can put the interfaces in. Then bolted in. I've got the part of the box back together. I've got the Blu-ray player in place. In the back, I have attached the USB cables. I have put a little bit of back pressure in there to keep them secure. Put a tie point here. Power cable for the Blu-ray player, just to keep the back end from bouncing around. And I did the same thing with the HDMI. Now the Raspberry Pi is a small little computer, but it doesn't have any buttons. And I found out from testing that when you turn it off with a command, powering up, you have to unplug and plug back in. So I bought this power switch. Now, I'm just going to slide the cable under there. I'm going to Velcro this in place. But the way it works is it plugs into the micro USB port, and then the power cable connects to it, the power block. So this is the best place I could think to put it. So I'm going to Velcro this here, and I'm going to notch where I have that black to run this through and put it together. It's not as clean as I would like, but this is pretty much the only alternative other than some non-plug and play type things, which I didn't really want to go through. So get back, let me take care of it, and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so now I have the processor in. I've got the power supply run. This is the processor. This is the emitter block. This is where the IR emitters are going to plug in. Everything's in here secure. Don't want to, this will get tied in up here later. I don't want things flapping around, bouncing around when we're driving down the road, so I'm making sure everything's in there secure. These are screwed down. And the good thing is this is plywood, not particle board, so the chances of screws pulling out of this is a lot better than if it was particle board. They should hold pretty good. Just remember that this is really thin wood. Don't use screws that are longer. I haven't done that yet, but I am being careful. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the top part into the cabinet back together. I took it apart, obviously, to put the interfaces and the black piece of plastic on, but I also, good time to mount this down because it covers all this up. Let me put it back together. We'll see what we got. Okay, so everything's shaping up right now. Luckily, the matrix switcher has brackets that screw onto it. So this is screwed down. The Raspberry Pi, I put a couple of wire tie standoffs. I screwed those down, and then I can pick the whole thing up by that. Now the mount for the Apple TV's made to more hang it on a wall vertically. So I've drilled a couple of holes in it. 2 holes to screw it to the ground, to the board. They're sticky underneath. I pulled the tape off, so it's stuck and screwed. This isn't going anywhere ever. Now remember, all these devices will be upside down once this thing is in place. Flip it over and show you what the front looks like. So I've got the black, everything is in. This is an IR emitter. Once I find the right place, this will get attached to the front of the Blu-ray player, which will allow me to wirelessly, using RF, send the signals from my remote to the processor and out this emitter block, and I'll have emitters on all the devices, and I'll go over that in a little bit. So it's taken me a couple of tries to figure this out. The power is the biggest issue, because obviously I have the surge protector stuck in. I just have this Velcroed. I've got power from devices under here. I got power from these devices. You know, as you can see, I've got 5 things to plug in. It's a lot of power wire. Now I could have gone the really, probably the better route and cut some of these wires down and splice them together, but that's way too much work, and I think I figured out a way. So I got some of these, I call them line liberators, but they're basically short extension cords. And they do a really good job for power blocks. Now I bought 2 little short ones, but since I'm in the AV industry, I have spare parts, leftover things. Luckily, I had a longer one. So I was having a hard time figuring out a way to get the power blocks up here in such a way where I could kind of keep all my power together, and the big jumble will get cleaned up and basically is going to go right in this area here. But I needed to keep this area open because that is where all the inputs for the HDMIs and the outputs for the HDMIs go. There's plenty of room here for it. I did buy thin HDMI cables. They're a lot more flexible. They're shorter connectors, and they'll make it real easy to fit it, you know, in here. There's still plenty of room to get them plugged in. And this is the end for the outputs, and I needed a little more room, so I wanted to make sure that I had this space in here for the much larger cables that are part of the Airstream. Now keep in mind that this is the bottom, so all of these things here are upside down. So you need to make sure that you have them secured. For the Apple TV, I drilled holes and put these wire ties through here. All that is they're nubs to keep the large wire tie that I wrapped around it from sliding off of it due to vibrations and stuff. It's not going to go down because I've got the plugs here. So it'll only go as far as the plugs. So at this point, the power is routed. Here's my signal cable, the HDMIs, and the USB cable for the Raspberry Pi. That's going to end up plugging in right in here somewhere. And that's for the front port. I do have one more HDMI to run that's coming out of the Raspberry Pi over here. They're basically going to come up through here together and then land where they need to land. All of this is going to get tied up. And the last thing I will need to do is install IR emitters. And as I explained before, the processor receives the signal from my handheld remote, which is right here. Now I would expect for any of you guys that are planning on trying to copy this, this is not something you can buy off the shelf. you have to get it from a dealer or be a dealer in my case. So I got, you know, really good deal on the handheld remote. So you could probably do something with this with a Logitech Harmony type remote, but you'll have to be a little bit more creative. Actually, this would suit the Harmony remote well, because you could put the blasters down here and they would hit the IR port, which is here on the Apple, here on the Wirestorm, and this plug-in Flirk receiver here. So you could access all of that. The thing I don't know is the new Harmonies may require internet service or some sort of local LAN or something in order, a Wi-Fi type setup in order to work. It's pretty crammed. If you're doing this yourself, trying to copy this idea, try to keep your power and your AV and try to keep things separately. Don't run them together. It's a really tight space, but if you take your time and think about it, don't be afraid to reverse what you were doing and try something different. I got in here a little while ago, and I had the power one way, and I cut it all out and decided to use a longer line liberator so I could put this power block down here out of the way, and that freed up this area in here for what I needed. Anyway, so I'm going to get everything cleaned up and be right back. So now I have the HDMI cables all run, and I have the auxiliary input, USB input run. I've got everything kind of coiled and bunched up in here. I wanted to make sure that these ports weren't blocked. The only thing left, I've test fit it. The only thing left are the emitters. I'm gonna do those shortly. Be right back. I've done some testing. I've got everything working properly. I've got all the emitters in place. Now I'm just going to attach them. And I use this, as you can see, this is a 3M product. It comes with some hardware that I install. It comes with a sheet of this, and I've been using it over the years because it's really good and it sticks well and the heat doesn't mess it up. So I don't have to worry about the emitters falling off. The front one's not as bad as the ones that are tucked under here. So I've still obviously got to do some cleanup on the emitter wires, but you can see I've placed them all and I've tested them all and they work great. So I'm going to clean up all this wire and then install it into the camper. Alright, so as you can see, I've got the emitters all taped in to where even if they pop loose, these are just little snap-in little things that come with these particular brand of emitters. They snap into this little disc. Even if it's to pop out of the disc, the emitter is not going to fall away from the spot where it needs to hit. Now, the IR emitter wire is real fine, so I don't like to use wire ties, mainly because the wire is so fine. When you start cutting a wire tie, you can easily nick and screw up one of these wires. So I use Velcro or I use twist ties, like I did over here, mainly just to hold them in place. It's not heavy wire, so it's not going to flop around or anything. Next step is to take this out, install it in the camper, and then do the final tweaks on the remote control program. So at this point, we are all done. This phase, the second part of my AV upgrade, please click like, hit the subscribe button down below. This is Jeff from Airstream Nerds, and I'll see you on the next trip.